Okay, this is the remaining examples from the 6.1 notes that we were doing in Trig this week. Making sure that we get all of the examples covered. So this is example number 5 in the packet. It says find two positive and two negative coterminal angles for negative 5 pi over 4. We already know that if you were in degrees, finding coterminal angles meant to either add or subtract 360 degrees. You added for positive direction and you subtracted for negative direction. So in radians, which is what this problem is in since it has the pi in it, we need to do add or subtract 2 pi because 2 pi is the same thing as 360 degrees. So for our two positive cases, we're going to add, for the first one, adding 2 pi once. Now, because these are fractions, you're going to have to get a common denominator. And the common denominator would be 4. So if we multiply this by 4 over 4, that would make it 8 pi over 4. And 8 minus 5 pi would be 3 pi over 4. So there would be our first positive coterminal angle. And then if we added another 2 pi to that, so essentially just imagine adding 2 pi again to what you already have. So 3 pi over 4 plus another 8 pi over 4 would be 11 pi over 4. So those are our two positive angles. And this one. To get the negatives, we do the same thing except we subtract. So negative 5 pi over 4, since we already know that it's negative 2 pi, we can go ahead and change that to negative 8 pi over 4 since it's the same denominator. So this is still 2 pi, and this would be negative 13 pi over 4 for the first one. And then so that I'm going to go ahead and circle that one. And then we would subtract another 8 pi over 4 because we're subtracting 2 pi again. So that would make this negative 21 pi over 4. So there are my two positive and my two negative coterminal angles for negative 5 pi over 4. The next question, example number 6, asks us to find complementary and supplementary angles. Remember, complementary means you add to 90 degrees. Supplementary means you add to 180 degrees. In terms of radians, remember, to turn something into radians, you multiply by pi over 180. So if we do that, 90 goes into 180 twice, so that actually makes that pi over 2. And 180 times pi over 180 means that it would be pi. So in degrees, complementary means adds up to 90. And degrees, supplementary means add up to 180 degrees. But if you're talking about radians, complementary needs to add to pi over 2, and supplementary needs to add to pi. So if our theta is pi over 6, the complementary would be pi over 2, take away the pi over 6 that we've already used. We're going to need a common denominator, so we're going to multiply this fraction by 6 over 6, this one by 2 over 2. That would make this 6 pi over 12 minus 2 pi over 12, which is 4 pi over 12. And if we reduce that down, that would divide both by 4, so that would be pi over 3. And then the supplementary part, we would need to do pi minus pi over 6. Just make this first fraction be over 6. That would be 6 pi over 6, getting a common denominator. And when we subtract, we would get 5 pi over 6, because it's 6 minus 1. Okay, so that's how you deal with complementary and supplementary when dealing with radians. And then the final example that we skipped over in class from section 6.1 was a two-parter, hit the wrong button, a two-parter from example 7. It's just converting things back and forth using the pi over 180 or 180 over pi, depending on which way you're going. So it says find the exact. Now let me talk about this for a minute. Exact means no decimals. It means you're going to leave as a fraction in reduced form. That's exactly what we mean by exact. We don't want you turning anything to an approximation. That's supposed to say form. It looks like farm. So if we take this is 95 degrees. We know that if we want to turn that into radians, we need pi over 180. And we notice that that would be 95 pi over 180, but they're both divisible by 5. If we divide them both by 5, I believe it turns into 19 pi over 36. And 19 and 36 have nothing else in common. To do the opposite way, we do negative 5 pi over 2, but this time this is radians already, so you want to turn this into degrees, so you want the pi to cancel out. So anytime you're trying to go back to degrees, you want the pi in the denominator. So that makes this negative 900 when you multiply those two together, divided by 2, which is negative 450 degrees. Okay, so that gets us caught up on 6.1, and the notes now for that section are complete.